What I have today is the thing I did this morning, as a matter of fact. Well, I had it marked in here, and then I moved my little piece of paper. That was smart. It's Proverbs 10:17. Let me just get there real quick, because I never think to put the verse on here. I never do. I never put the verse on these to make you look it up. Not that anybody does, but Proverbs 10:17 says, "He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, but he that refuses reproof erreth." And I can't say that. I'm not exactly sure where this came from. I know what God was talking to me about. Yesterday, Dick Dory, of all people, called me up, and it was one of those conversations you're not quite sure what you're talking about. And he was asking me some questions. He was asking me about what's that thing called that I gave you, that thing? It's a thing. Wait, he's asked me, he says, when you grill and you use charcoal briquettes, do you like put them in this little thing and put newspaper under it and fire them up and get it going, and then you dump them in? And it's like, well, I don't grill. I hate to grill. I don't. No, I'm going to do something else. I don't want to grill. I hate to grill. It's too hot. I'm already hot. I don't be outside in front of it. No, that's just, and you get greasy and all that. I said, I know a guy. I said, Tom would love to have whatever this thing is you're talking about. I don't even know what it is. And Tom was like, oh, yeah, this is really cool. I don't know what it is, but I know what it is, just don't know what it's called. But he said, he also said, I have a couple of models. Dick Dory, y'all, Dick Dory, he's like 147 years old. He's amazing. So he said, I have some models. Oh, he's only 102. I'm lying. He said, I have some models. Would you be interested in them? Like, snap together models. And I'm thinking, well, sure, I can. My grandkids are coming. I like models, that'd be cool. He said, what do you want me to do with them? And I said, well, just, when you come down here, ring the bell. The secretary, my wife, Miss Shelley, who's ever there, will help you do whatever you do. And so evidently what they did is they just dropped them out front on the sidewalk out there. And I was walking out, and there's models. There's boxes and bags and boxes and boxes, probably 40 or 50. And there's sailboats, there's ships, there's airplanes, there's cars, there's spaceships, there's helicopters, there's tanks, there's kits to build purses with, and Bible bags and wallets and key purses and leather stuff, and there's just blah. And I got to thinking this could be a lot of fun for the high school. At first I was thinking some of the higher elementary, but I don't think so. A couple of them, but this could be like a class for the high school. Let them build something. I don't know how many. Have you ever built a model like that ever? Star, anything like that? See, when I grew up, I did. How about you, Tom? I built airplanes. I built cars, muscle cars, spaceships. I built an Apollo. Built a Saturn V rocket once. But anyway, I wasn't expecting this at all. I finally figured out where they came from. Is he had a thing where every time you bought a model from these people, money would go to the homeless veterans. So Dick Dory, he's like, dude, I'll just give them money, and they sent me all this stuff, and I'll do something with it someday, so he gave it to me. But this talked about following instructions. So it goes like this. Either we follow instructions or we refuse reproof. So I'm putting this to myself. When we follow instructions, we do as we're told. That's what following instructions is. We do it the way we're told. We do it when we're told. When we follow instructions, we will be, the Bible says, in the way of life. That's where we're going to be, where God wants us to be. The instructions are God. And if we'll do what he says, how he says to do it, when he says to do it, we will be what he calls in the way of life. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's a good place to be. And following instructions is definitely a skill that we have to learn. Not many people follow instructions. To be able to follow instructions, I got to thinking about this. The first thing we have to do is put away our pride. Our pride will tell us that we don't need to listen to the instructions because we already know how to do it. Why would I read the instructions if I know how to do it? Does that make sense? And it's so funny because I was talking to Ryan Offiero out in the parking lot, and we were talking a little bit about this, and he says, I'm just a picture guy. And I know what that means. Anybody know what that means? It means they look at the picture, I got it, and they go build it. And I said, wow, you need some help, Ryan. Because it doesn't work that way. And here's what God was telling me. To follow instructions, we must first read the instructions. To follow the instructions, you have to read the instructions. You have to understand the process. You have to look at the parts. You have to get an understanding of what needs to be done and how to do it. You have to see how things are supposed to work. Next, you go back and you read the instructions. And you read the first step. And you do what it says, and then you go on to the next step. And as we continue on, we must continually refer back to the instructions. And if we run into problems, we have to stop and go back and make sure we've done the proper things in the proper way. I never try to force something that doesn't seem to fit. How many times have you guys been putting something together, you're like, oh, this won't make it fit. It doesn't fit for a reason, most of the time. Now, I understand men's things, and, people complain about IKEA. I've bought a bunch of stuff from IKEA. Their instructions are phenomenally detailed, easy to follow. And if you will follow them, you'll have a couple extra parts because they design it that way, but there won't be like, 3 extra hinges and a door, and a wheel. And it's just like, and this thing is like, if you follow instructions, okay? So as we continue on, we refer back to the instructions. If we run into problems, we stop and go back and make sure we've done the proper things in the proper way. Never try to force something that doesn't fit. Sometimes, I find this in my life a lot, it's best to stop for a while and do something else. Sometimes we need to ask for help for somebody that's done it many times before. Now, the caveat here is when we're trying to follow man's instructions, we may run into problems. I gave something to Tyler, the boys, for Christmas last year, and Tyler opened it up. My son Tyler, I don't care what it is. It could be a McDonald's toy. He reads the instructions. He just does. He reads the instructions, always. And then he looks at things. So I gave him this little toy, and he started reading the instructions, and he just started laughing. He almost fell out of his chair. It had been written in Chinese. And whoever translated it had not done a good job. And the wording was like, what? It was like somebody taking a Chinese English dictionary and translating the instructions. Had nothing to do with building the thing. The words were just weird, odd. I mean, it was like, I wish I could remember what it was. It was the strangest thing in the world. And it was a simple little thing, but we just laughed and laughed because the instructions definitely were not clear. The instructions might be unclear. The picture might be wrong. There may be missing parts. I ordered a Harvard bed frame online when we moved into our house. And I opened up, this big long package comes up, I open it up, and I'm looking at the instructions, I'm looking at the parts, I'm looking at the instructions, looking at the parts, I'm like, I'm missing a bunch of stuff here. There was like over half the stuff wasn't even there. And I called up the company and I said, hey, you're missing this and this and this, and I gave them the part numbers. And so they sent me the whole new thing again. So I now have 1.5 ones of these things. But you got to, you can't just dive into it. But this is men's instructions. With time and patience, you can always overcome that. But here's the deal. When you're following God's instructions, none of these issues are going to occur. This is God's instructions. When God tells us what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, his instructions are very clear. They show all the parts, how to proceed in great detail. They're never missing parts. If we ever have problems, here's the cool part. We can ask the person that wrote the instructions. He's right here inside of me. He's there. The one who knows everything about the product, the process, the parts, the procedures. And God will talk us through any problems anytime we ask. It's not a big deal. The only problem you're ever going to run into following God's instructions is when you don't follow them. They will never be unclear. They'll never miss any parts. There'll never be any extra parts. God doesn't need to give us extra parts. He gives us exactly what we need. And there's never parts that don't fit. The only problem is us not reading the instructions, not following the instructions, and not asking for help. Now, if we refuse to follow instructions, here we are. A lot of people, here's one of the little models he sent me. Okay, see this little thing here? This has 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5, 6, maybe 7 pieces and a screwdriver for little tiny screws. 7 pieces. Now, I'm pretty sure. What do you think, Tom? Could you look at that thing, put it together? Boom, easy, right? That's not a big deal, right? Well, here's one. It's a little bit more intense. Just a little bit, though, not much. This one only has about 10 parts. Okay, a little bit. Again, you can just look at the picture. I'm pretty sure I could put that together. Now, I would read instructions. But here's life. Here's life. This is life. I challenge anybody to look at the picture and build this. There's over 300 parts. Some of them are metal, some of them are plastic. Okay? If you don't read these instructions, you are never, ever going to get this together. Now, you might get a thing that looks a little bit like a Harley, but I mean, I think the motor runs. I'm not positive. You have to take a tiny model gas and put it in there. I'm joking. Does that make sense, guys? And we think in our pride says, I got this. I don't need that. And God says, oh man, you do. And you know what? God likes to start with little things like that one Tom has. And then he'll move us up to one that Elijah has. And after a while, after you've done this, I would hesitate to build that one right there right now. I'd have to go and build some of the ones I used to build. And do it properly and right. And that one there would probably take 3, 4, 5 weeks to build and spread out all over the place and have the parts lined out. And you got to paint it before you put it together, and you have to assemble it with the right amount of glue. In plastic models, less is more. Not with like wood models where more is more. You start doing a lot of glue and you end up with this glob. So here's if we refuse to follow instructions, if we start with the attitude that we already know how to do it, we're going to end up with a mess. And that's everything in our life. Our pride tells us we don't need any help. And the devil encourages us in that a lot. We can just look at the picture and do it. We won't ask. We won't listen. We won't read God's instructions. And we won't listen to what he wants us to do because we already know how. And if we get in trouble, then maybe we'll go and ask for help. Maybe. If we ignore the instructions and do what we want, we're going to end up with something that doesn't work properly, if at all. We're going to have extra pieces. We're going to have something that needs to be taken apart and reassembled. And often we're going to end up with something that's useless and has to be discarded. Back out in California, we got a bunch of the cabinets, kind of like these cabinets over here, only wooden ones. And they bought, I think, 15 of them. And because they wanted to have in every room a place for the teachers to keep their books, blah, blah, blah. And they're nice little cabinets. They're about $90 a piece. And somebody, you wouldn't know anything about them anyway, but one of the guys said, I'll put those together. And he started assembling. He got 2 or 3 of them done. And the doors wouldn't shut. The shelves wouldn't go in properly. One of them, the bottom kept falling out. And finally I said, look, dude, just, leave it alone. I will do it. And so I got out the instructions. And I built like the next 10 of them. And then I took theirs. And sometimes you can't take these things back apart because things break and there's not stuff and, extra parts and all this. And I ended up having to rebuild theirs, which took 3 or 4 times as long as the ones that I built. Which is, the thing is, do it right the first time. It's so much easier than to have it, because sometimes you cannot fix it. You got to just throw it away and start over again. Some things can't be fixed, that's right. But you might have to just start all over again and think of the time you've wasted. Well, I want to get it done. I want to get it done too. But when I'm done, I want to be done. I want to be finished with it and move on to something else. I want to have to come back and fix it so we can follow our pride or we can follow our instructions. And I know that I have issues with that a lot of time in my life. But this model thing just like triggered this whole thing. And that's why I think it would make such a good class for our high schoolers to help them to learn to follow instructions. Because pride says, I can do that. I don't need to follow those instructions. It's not that simple. Because whoever designed that, they have a plan. They have a plan, and it's a good plan. I recognize Testers is a great model company. Their stuff is usually pretty. I've built hundreds of Testers models, and 98% of the time it's all there. It fits. It's good, and 100% of the time God's stuff works. And we got to get rid of our pride. We don't know, and just let God do whatever He wants. All right, go ahead, Quinn, cut that. somebody really wants a Harley, I think you could probably ride that thing. I'm not sure. Back by 8 o'clock. Let's see. Everybody's here that's supposed to be here. My wife is going to show up at some point in time, I think. She said she was just running late. I guess. Oh, no, air conditioning's on in there. You'll like it, Tom. It's pretty. All I don't have, oh, there, speaking of the devil, she shows up. Miss Deanna, I have asked, what's his name? Dr. J, if he'll do RU next week. I haven't got an answer from him yet.
Who?
Jason Dreitcher.
Oh, okay.
Because I won't be here, Tom won't be here, Quinn won't be